Hi, everybody, and welcome to the second episode of the Theater Teachers Toolkit. My name is Alex, and I am the owner and creator of Perform Solutions, which creates and produces this lovely podcast slash YouTube video series to help theater teachers create and produce awesome things with their students. So, last week we talked about You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown, and why that is a great production and a great start to the world of musical theater, and sort of the ins and the outs of how you would go about creating and producing You're a Good Man, Charlie Brown with your students. So if you did not listen to that last week, I would definitely go back and listen to it. You can listen to it out of order. It's really not a super big deal. But I would encourage you to go back and listen to it or watch it if you're joining us on YouTube, so that you can sort of get the vibe and understand where we're going. So this series was created to help theater educators sort of understand the processes and the ins and the outs of secondary education and theater and how the two things can go together. I know that sometimes it felt like, as a theater educator, I was drowning because I was teaching a full day of classes, and then I had a full schedule of rehearsals, and then I had to go home and be a mother and a wife, and that's a lot of things. That is a lot of things. Now, that doesn't make room for other things, like if your spouse wants to go get a master's degree, or I've done that, or if, life happens. So this was born to help sort of navigate that and make things a little bit easier for us, for the theater educator. So today, on episode 2, we're going to sort of talk about a play. So last week we talked about a musical, and this week we're going to talk about a play. And today we are going to be talking about Puffs, or 7 Increasingly Eventful Years of a Certain School of Magic and Magic. This play, for the last 2 or 3 years, has ranked in the top 10 of most produced plays in high schools in the United States. So Playbill does sends out information. I guess the Educational Theater Association actually collects the data, and maybe just Playbill releases it. And so they sort of just ask, what shows did you produce? And how many did you produce? And things like that. So they have a collection of the top 10 most popular musicals, top 10 most popular straight plays, top 10 one acts. So if you are interested, I will link that list below. We are going to be covering a majority of the shows on that list, just because great start. Let's look at what other people are doing and being successful at, and learning from them, and how we can do that. So Puffs was written by playwright Matt Cox, and it is, obviously, we're parodying Harry Potter here, but they don't come right out and say that. They don't, it's very clear, and like on the licensing company's webpage, there is, on Concord Theatricals, there is a disclaimer. I'm going to read it for you. Let's just go with the 2-act edition. And it says something to the effect of, J.K. Rowling does not endorse or support. It says, Puffs is not authorized, sanctioned, licensed, or endorsed by J.K. Rowling, Warner Brothers, or any person or company associated with Harry Potter books, films, or plays. So, just for example, the characters are not named particularly after anybody that you know. So there's a character named Cedric, but he doesn't have a last name. There's a character named Mr. Voldy, right? So we have Susie Bones, Harry, but it's just Harry. Okay. There's also um, uh, Hermione and Blondo Malfoy and Professor Sprouty, Professor Turban, you know, Death Buddy. So we're clearly parodying Harry Potter. But again, it's not sanctioned. So the good thing about this show is that, one, you will 100% have student buy-in because Harry Potter is a massive franchise. It's massive. It has a huge cult following. People are interested in it. And so that is something that's going to play in your favor here. So Puffs, let's just read a little description. This clever and inventive play never goes more than a minute without a laugh, giving you a new look at a familiar adventure from the perspective of three potential heroes just trying to make it through a magic school that proves to be very dangerous for children. Alongside them are the Puffs, a group of well-meaning, loyal outsiders with a thing for badgers. Yeah. Who are so lovable and relatable, you'll leave the theater wishing they were in the stories all along. Okay, so it follows the main character whose name is Wayne Hopkins, and he is described as an American 90s kid obsessed with video games, pop music, and peak cinema. A kid with a great heart who is determined to be a hero, even if a certain boy with a magic scar keeps stealing his thunder. So he is basically raised by his uncle who lives in the South and finds out he's a wizard because his parents died. And yeah, you know, we're oh, I'm sorry. They live in Catalpoke Springs, New Mexico. So it's just a fun story that parodies and sort of mimics this idea of Harry Potter. And it does sort of follow the 7 year sequence. So the play takes place over a period of 7 years. For 7 years, a certain boy wizard went to a certain wizard school and conquered evil. This, however, is not his story. This is the story of the Puffs, who just happened to be there too. A tale for anyone who has never been destined to save the world. It is so fun. It is hilarious. The first time I read it, I laughed so hard. Um, and I really think that it is an awesome show with buy-in that is fun that your students will enjoy doing. So the full 2 act length is 2 hours, and they also have a one act cutting, which is 105 minutes. So here's the thing. So I looked into doing this for one act competition back in the day. And so I reached out and I was like, okay, you have a one act edition, but it's only 15 minutes shorter than the original 2 act play. And they were like, oh, yeah, that's just because we cut out the intermission. And I was like, okay, because that makes sense. So I don't actually know if there is an approved one act competition style cutting of this play. Um, there's just a shorter version without an intermission, essentially. So I'm interested in the difference. Take with that what you will. What I will say is the other great thing about this show is that there are a 2 act and a one act version for young wizards. So they do make it accessible for more conservative schools or more conservative communities. I don't really remember anything too racy or terrible. Like, you get behind, you think about Clue, and that show is going to have content, right? They're adults and they're drinking. I mean, Miss Peacock drinks literally the entire show. So, you know, making a young addition for that makes sense. You know, another example would be She Kills Monsters, where, you know, there is language and issues that more conservative schools might find problematic. Uh, yeah, we're just gonna leave it at that. So I understand why there's a young adventure version there. I think maybe the young wizards version is a little bit more accessible, which is awesome and definitely an option to take advantage of if that is your purview. So definitely, I would encourage you to purchase the script and read through it. If you are interested in doing it, you can also, if you just kind of want to know the story and the plot line, one thing I do is I literally go to YouTube and I see if there's any versions posted. It's illegal for them to post it, but if it's there, I'm gonna watch it, right? So there is that option as well. If you're like me and you're more of a visual learner, sometimes it's hard for me to get through scripts. This one wasn't hard for me to get through. However, you know, sometimes it's nice to just watch a play in the background while you're doing some grading or something. So definitely something to consider. That is sort of like a hack, if it's really a hack. I don't know. That's my life hack. My theater teacher hack is to just find an example. Even if the show is like not a great quality, you're still getting the story and sort of understanding what you might be getting yourself into if you do that show. So like, for example, I did this a few years ago. I needed a second musical for a show for my season because I was doing two musicals. I had already had the first musical picked. I knew what I wanted to do there, and so I was like, I have this leading male who I want to give an opportunity to be a leading male. That's like the lead. You know, he had been a leading male in other productions, but it wasn't like he was the titular character, right? So I looked around and I watched She Loves Me, the Zachary Levi and Jane Krakowski version on Broadway HD. I loved it. I knew what I was getting into. I knew that it was a music heavy show, but it took place in one shot, like one location. There wasn't a ton of change in that realm. I mean, the Broadway revival set of that show was phenomenal and it did win best set because it should have. But watching it really helped me sort of wrap my mind around how to sort of produce it moving forward. So definitely a hack for theater teachers who are like, I don't know what to do, because I belong to Facebook groups all the time with high school theater teachers where they're like, I have 5 strong women and 2 strong men. What shows should I do? Great, like great questions, excellent, and definitely go to the knowledge base there on the Facebook groups of other theater teachers who are doing the work, who are happy to provide shows that were awesome and worked well for them. But another way to do that is to simply just go to Concord Theatricals or MTI and type in the cast requirements that you have, and it'll pull up shows that rank in that category, and then simply just go to YouTube and see if you can find clips or songs or, you know, whatever it was, a play or musical, whatever it is. So that's just sort of my life hack when it comes to that. Back to Puffs. So Puffs is great because there's a lot of characters. There are a lot of characters in this show. However, the casting requirements is that you only need 11. So on Concord Theatrical's website, it suggests 5 female presenting people, 5 male presenting people, and 1 of whatever gender. It doesn't really matter. And so again, we're in high school. We don't really operate in those realms because you get who you get, and that's how it's going to be. Just again, remember that if you cast a female presenting person who uses she, her, or they, them pronouns, right? I mean, whoever you cast, if you cast someone who doesn't use he, him pronouns in a a character who uses he, him pronouns, you have to use the he, him pronouns in the script. You cannot change that. So, but like I said, again, we work in high school and middle school, and that doesn't always happen. You do not always have the exact right numbers, and that's okay. You can figure out ways around that. I mean, how many female SpongeBobs have we seen? A ton, a ton. And it's great because it's a high tenor role. And, here you go. I've seen a lot of female Jack Kellys. That Santa Fe note isn't going to hit itself sometimes. So, you work with what you have. So I always say it's a cast of 11. Cast the best people for the role. Who cares, right? But you could go beyond 11, and the script does support that. There are a ton of roles. However, originally, those 11 people play all of those different roles in the show. But again, if you're, you have a large program and you want to do a show that can accommodate a larger number of people, Puffs is that option. In fact, that was going to be the show that I directed before I left. That was going to be my fall show that I was going to direct with my students. I had the kids for it. I knew they would like it a lot. And so that was where I was going to go. Another great thing about Puffs is that it's a typical straight play. So that means rights are relatively inexpensive. Okay, so the cost, it says on Concord Theatrical per performance, is $120. So $120 per performance. If you do 4 shows, let's just do some quick math here. 120 times 4, you're looking at $480. So you're looking at under $500 for performance rights. And again, for straight plays, I typically charge $8 and $10. For musicals, I do $10 and $12. So $8 would be the student staff price, and 10 would be the general admission price. So we're going to do 50-50. Let's say you seat your performance space seats 100 people. And you expect to seat 100 people per night, per show, because you have a large cast and everybody's mom and dad is going to want to go. So 50% at $8 would be $400 plus 50 seats times 10. So you're looking at $900 just from one show. So you're going to make back your money within the first performance of the show, just in performance rights alone. So this to me is worth it. And I think the thing that I like the most about this show is that you can do it in a flexible theatrical space. I know a lot of programs have a typical proscenium stage, and that makes sense. I understand that. It's just the easiest and most flexible space for a high school. I know that some people don't have that space. I had a proscenium stage in a library at one point in my career, or I just had a library and I had to sort of work around it, So, but what I think would be really fun is to do this in sort of a flexible black box space, which I know some schools do have. Some schools only have a black box space, which is awesome. And I think that Puffs really lends itself to that. I think it'd be really fun to do the show in a thrust. I would be interested to see. So sorry, I was going to sneeze. I would be interested to see if you could figure out a way to do this in the round, so that sort of minimizes set. You could conceivably do this. You'd have to be creative and think outside the box, I think, for a lot of some of the magical moments that happen, but I think definitely you could figure out a way to do this in the round relatively cheap. So we've talked a little bit about, cast size, summary, what it's about, how long it's going to be, how much it's going to cost. And so I want to talk about the reasons I love this show and the reasons I would be hesitant to put on this show. Just, or things to think about, not hesitance, because if it's a good show for your students, you shouldn't let something that scares you put you off from doing it, right? I learn that every day in my MFA program, right? So what I love about this show is you have audience buy-in, right? The like posters, the advertising that they've created for this show is Hufflepuff, essentially. So when people see this, they're going to get, oh, we're talking about Harry Potter here. Even though we're not talking about Harry Potter, but we are talking about Harry Potter, right? So you have audience buy-in. So automatically, people are going to be interested in coming to see your show who might not be John Smith's mother, right? People in the community might want to come see it. Next is student buy-in. Student buy-in is huge. When you pick shows that students don't want to do, they don't audition. Unless they're like the diehard theater students that you have, your core group of students who will audition for anything because they just love doing it, right? But when you want to grow a program, when you're trying to grow a program, it's important to pick shows that have student buy-in, because if you don't do that, you're not going to be bringing in new blood, new people to sort of learn and grow in your program. And so I think that a show like Puffs they might not know what the show is about, but they see, oh, it has to do with Harry Potter, I'm interested. And even if you sort of like explain it's not about Harry Potter, it just sort of parodies and talks about it in a satirical way, they'll understand, and I think they'll have buy-in. The next thing I like about this show is you can do a lot with a little. So I think one of the jokes is that one of the characters, they use a mop for it. It's just funny, and people have gotten really creative with the way that they've created the death buddies, and I have just seen some really creative and out of the box ways that teachers have created this show with their students. And so that's something that I super, super love about this show. So the other thing is that, like I said, it has been on the docket for most popular shows for high schools to perform for the last several years. So what that means is that there have been a lot of teachers across the country who have done this show, which means there are a lot of resources and information out there for you. I am a pro. I am a big fan of not gatekeeping, one, which is why I'm doing this podcast / YouTube series. Two, doing a lot of research, okay? Like I said earlier, being a theater teacher and a theater director is overwhelming. It is incredibly overwhelming. And sometimes you can only be stretched so thin. So if someone else has found a way to make something in your show easier, use the idea, right? We're not copying staging. We're not copying, things like that. But if someone's like, this is how you can create this prop in a relatively cheap and inexpensive way, that's how I'm going to do it. That's how I'm going to do it. Because, one, I'm tired. I don't have the brain capacity to think fun and funky and fresh. Sometimes I do, but that's not going to be a majority of the times. Do I want to be able to create something awesome with my students? Absolutely. But am I tired? Absolutely. So don't feel bad. Don't feel bad if you cannot give 3,000% to everybody, because you can't. It's just not possible. And I am the number one person to understand what it's like to feel guilty for that. But don't. That's silly. Someone else has come up with a way to do the thing that you need to do, and the internet is a treasure trove of information. One place for you to find help with this is on Facebook. So on Facebook, there is a high school theater teachers and directors Facebook page. It is great. It's a treasure trove of information. The people on there are lovely. People put up free resources. They ask questions and people answer. It's lovely. Of course, it's like any Facebook group where sometimes you just want to bring the popcorn and watch as poop hits the fan, if you will. Sometimes that's fun. But overall, it is great. And from that group, a lot of people started asking questions about very specific musicals like SpongeBob, Big Fish, Puffs, right? These musicals that require a lot of props, a lot of costumes, and a lot of creative thinking. People were like, how do I do this thing? Has anybody done this thing? Have you figured it out yet? And so what this community did was they created their own sort of group. So on Facebook, there is the Puffs Play Production and Pointers Facebook page. On this page, people are posting places that they've found props, how they've created props, how they've done XYZ, so many things. And I will link that in my podcast and I will link that in my YouTube video for you all to find, because again, doing a lot of research helps, right? Doing research passively, or even if you can come to one singular place, this Puffs Play Production and Pointers Facebook page, and you can find a treasure trove of information and you don't have to look elsewhere. What an awesome resource. What an awesome resource, and a way that we can help each other out, because we're a community and we should help each other out. So that is my soapbox, if you will, but sort of my pointer of, hey, I found this thing that can help. Let me help you in case you didn't know. So finally, let's talk about the things that I would think about when wanting to produce puffs and things about that. It's a props heavy show. It is a props heavy show, so you are going to need to invest some money into props. For me, I would suggest doing this show in the fall. You don't have to, and people can do whatever they want. But typically, when you're doing things in the fall, things like Harry Potter costumes and cauldrons and wands and XYZ, things that you might need, fog machine, whatever, are relatively inexpensive because it's in season for that thing. Whereas when it's out of season, it's going to be a little bit more expensive. So to get more bang for your buck, do it in the season that makes sense to do it, if that makes sense. Right? It's like if you're going to do White Christmas or Elf, I don't know why you would do White Christmas, but people love White Christmas. That's not a me show, but people love that show, right? If you're going to do it, you want to do it in season because it's much easier to get those things in season. Or think ahead. For example, I did She Loves Me in the spring, and it takes place at Christmas time. It's not the majority of the plot line that it takes place at Christmas time, just it happens to end at Christmas time and there's this Christmassy song. So what did I do? I went after Christmas sale shopping and I got things on the cheap because I thought ahead and I knew that I was going to need a Christmas tree, I was going to need Christmas decorations, I was going to need all of these different things to be able to produce this show. So definitely something to think about. It is a props heavy show, but again, this lovely Facebook page is incredibly helpful. It's wonderful. It sort of tells you and breaks down things from teachers who have done the show, who are currently doing the show, okay? I have not directed this show yet. I've read it. I've wanted to produce it. I have seen many versions of it, but I have not personally directed it, so I don't have all the answers on how to do certain things like props. But I could come up with some ideas on how to do that. But again, we're tired. We're all very tired, and somebody else has done it and has thought of it. And so let's work together and band together. It is also a costume heavy show. You do need some specific costume pieces, but it's set in the 90s, right? So your students probably have access to a majority of the base costumes, like, t-shirts and jeans. I'm sure you can find something that works in the 90s era that they already own, and that's free, right? So definitely something to consider. I think all around Puffs is a great idea. Um, if you're wanting to sort of sort of create a show and produce a show that's going to have student buy-in and have audience buy-in, this is the choice for you. This show is great and it's really funny, and it'll be a fun time and a fun show to produce. Every teacher I've talked to who has directed this show has said that it has been a memorable and wonderful experience for their students and for them, and everybody really enjoyed it. So I really cannot encourage this show enough. As always, I'm really glad that you're here and you spent some time with me today learning and talking about shows and sort of the processes behind how we can um, work through projects and sort of figure out shows that work for our students. If you have any suggestions for shows you'd like for me to talk about, maybe you're like, I have this show on my list, but I haven't really had time to do the research on it. Could you do a podcast on it? Definitely leave me a comment. And definitely follow me on TikTok. Again, you can follow me at Perform Solutions on TikTok as well as on Instagram. And as always, I'm really glad that you're here.